Good afternoon, certainly here in the UK to everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. So we're here today to, I guess, celebrate the launch of the special issue. And we have a few people here who will give short speeches. I'll go through that in a second. But my name is Karen Hume. I work alongside my fantastic colleague who's in the room down there, Dr. Godswill Agbetora. And he is really the brainchild, I think, behind this special issue of the Journal of Energy and Natural Resources Law. So I think all the credit has to go to Godswill. Myself and Margarita, I think we were brought along, but it's definitely been brought along by Godswill. So it's been a really interesting process to work alongside him in this way, but also to see all the contributions, to read the contributions, and I think put this together. So I think we have a few thanks to start with. I'm sure Godswill will do that too. But first of all, thanks to Don, the editor-in-chief of the journal, for seeing that this was a really important topic and for helping us to put this together. And then thanks to all the contributors, of course, and my co-editors, to Margarita and to Godswill, and Chitsi, who put together the book review for us. So we have, I think it's about to launch. We'll hear more about that in a few minutes. It's about to launch. We have the editorial plus 9 articles and the book review, and several of those are on open access. But this special issue focuses on a topic that I know is really central to everyone here, to our research and our thinking, and definitely to Godswill, on the concept of energy justice and the notion of energy justice discourse, and particularly from global South perspectives. So just to explain a little bit about what will happen this afternoon, we'll have a few minutes of a keynote remarks by the journal's editor-in-chief, Professor Don Smith, which will be followed by some short remarks by Professor Raphael Heffron, who is obviously an expert in this field, and also by Professor Margarita, who is also an expert in this field. Godswill will then lead, I think, a discussion on some of the main points raised as sort of comments in the journal. And then I think Chitsi will follow up with what he's learned, I think, from writing the book review and maybe literature in the field. So this is a leading referee journal in the field of energy and natural resources law, and we were very privileged, I think, to be part of that and to launch this, but really interesting and I think very current issue as well, in the sense of gaining those global South perspectives on energy justice. We've gone through a process. Obviously, we launched the call for papers last year, and I know Godswill is going to look at that process with you and to draw out some of, I think, of the highlights, the range of issues, for example, that we've covered, looking at things like green hydrogen, shale gas, those issues of energy justice, and across particular countries. So I know we looked at China, Chile, we had contributions from India, for example, and across the ECOWAS region. So without further ado, I will hand over to the journal's editor-in-chief, Professor Don Smith, for his comments.
Well, thank you very much, Karen, and it is a real pleasure to be with you today. Where I am in Colorado in the United States, morning is just beginning. So I look forward to hearing what all of you have to say. I just want to say a few words before the program begins, because the program is really what is important. The Journal of Energy and Natural Resources Law was launched in the early 1980s in a partnership between the International Bar Association and the University of Dundee. Today, the journal is in its 43rd year of publication. Over that time, it has grown from a fledgling publication to now one of the world's most distinguished and well-regarded journals covering energy and natural resources issues. Earlier this month, 2 major journal ranking schemes, impact factor, and site score, reported that the journal remains in the top quartile in relation to all similar publications. The journal's success has been closely linked to our efforts to identify and publish timely articles and commentaries about key issues that underscore the world we live in. This is why the journal is particularly delighted today to announce the publication of this new special issue on Global South perspectives in energy justice. This effort has been led by three accomplished and highly respected guest editors, Godswill, Karen, and Margaretha. The other contributors have considered a course towards interpreting and applying the concept of energy justice for the Global South. In this regard, the contributors explore the region's socioeconomic hurdles and investigate the intersections of energy justice with other energy concepts like the just transition, while carefully examining policy, governance, and legal strategies. It is with much appreciation and respect that the journal is publishing this seminal work by all of you. Energy justice has been described as a global energy system that fairly disseminates both the benefits and costs of energy service, taking into account important socioeconomic and regional differences. Today's program, and all of you who are part of the publication, underscored the critical assessment of the Global South's perspectives. May I again say how pleased as editor I have been and am right now to have worked with your guest editors, and particularly Godswill, who did a fantastic job, and with such an impressive group of contributors. I wish you a very successful program, and thank you again for inviting me to say a few words. Thank you.
Many thanks, Don. I can ask Professor Heffron to say a few words.
Thank you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, so first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Godswill and his team of special guest editors, and also to his the university for giving support to academics, early career academics, to launch such an initiative. And as Karen indicated, giving support to an early career to develop such an initiative and to be able to take some leadership on something that I think is very important for the field of energy law, and also more globally, let's say, that broader area of energy justice. So I think it's a commendable achievement, and I think when we think of the way energy justice has grown, I would also like to commend Don as editor of the journal for giving support to develop a project such as a special issue in this way, and to grow the field more and to assist early career scholars to have a voice and to have a bigger voice. And I think it's very good news for me to hear of the continued success in terms of the impact of the Journal of Energy and Natural Resources Law. And I can only think that more ambition and let's say projects that early careers come up with, I'm sure may receive such future support in future. And I think it's for me, when I'm thinking about this, the field of energy justice scholarship, I think one of the exciting things I think we have to think about is, when I read through some of the articles, I see early career scholars and the different articles that have been produced for the special issue, I see them utilizing more and more of the literature on energy justice, which comes from a whole range of different disciplines. And I think as a, let's say, legal community, what I would like to see more of, and I think this initiative such as this special issue will contribute to it, but I would like to see more engineers and economists looking at the Journal of Energy and Natural Resources Law as somewhere they can find out more about the research and applied research, the conceptual ideas behind energy justice. And I think, let's say, we are already seeing that, because I think Don mentioning the success of the journal in terms of those different types of ranking. But let's say we need to ensure that this continues and that other scholars are utilizing, let's say, the legal perspectives and the legal research on energy justice. So when I think of energy justice, not to highlight just myself, but also to highlight the journal, thanks to Don. I did publish a short overview of how energy justice has evolved, which is in an earlier 2024 issue, about how energy justice has evolved over the last, let's say, 10, 11 years. And I think one of the key things as a legal community we can see is that these different principles people are talking about and are applying in their research, generally it's a mix of 3 to 5 of these, whether it be distributive, procedural, recognition, restorative, cosmopolitan justice. These justice principles are being used by a whole range of interdisciplinary researchers, but also by policymakers. And specifically in the US, they utilize them in Colombia and also in South Africa. And I see them being utilized in many other countries, different developing countries that I've been conducting research on. And you can see in different developments of, let's say, legal frameworks for trying to grow the energy industry in different ways. I think what you see are, people relying on 2 or 3 of these principles to build out a framework and to ensure that a policy is put into place in the energy sector. And I think, that's what we're seeing with some of the articles in this special issue. And it's what you're seeing with the growth of the energy justice literature. And I just happened to be on a call with a range of different colleagues who was part of a research dialogue series, international research dialogue series, just recently, earlier in the week. And one of the views was, this whole area around applying these justice principles in the energy sector, but more broadly as they apply in, let's say, in society, when we think about environmental protection, when we think about the climate transition, and we also think more broadly maybe about the just transition, that these principles, which have mainly been very much a key focus for energy justice scholars, that they really showcase that this is an area, despite all the good work that has been done so far, it's an area that's only going to grow and grow. So for those early careers who are here today to celebrate this special issue, for Godswill and his team and the range of scholars that they have got to contribute to this special issue, you should also rejoice in the fact that this area is just going to keep getting bigger. So it's an area to keep researching, to keep focusing on, and to keep, let's say, collaborating on. Because one of the things that excited me from this special issue was seeing the range of collaborations. And I think as a legal community, some of you will know that I've stressed the issue in maybe in an editorial or two, that we do need to work more collectively, because ideas, they just get better and better the more we work collectively. And while in many cases we also need some more patience as we work collectively, the reward is definitely there. So I think for me, this special issue highlights the benefit of working collectively. And I think as time will show, some of these articles will be very, very popular. And, I mentioned the issue of early career, and I think it's very important, that all of us try and promote early career scholarship. And for me, that's very commendable from the journal, that Don has promoted this opportunity for early careers to engage in this journal. And, earlier this year, we had a energy justice conference for early careers, and I would watch out for exciting news maybe on the 2025 version that may come soon in the forthcoming academic year. I would also highlight that there has been other opportunities at different conferences. The number of conferences that now highlight energy justice as one area they want to accept contributions on is growing and growing. And, I know that one of the articles produced in the special issue was from a former postdoc of mine, Elizabeth Stevens, who, along with another colleague, they met Emiliano. They met at the World Energy Justice Congress, where I also, they met in 2023 and have produced a good article for this special issue. But also, I want to highlight that at the recent Energy Justice Congress is where I met also Godswill. And I think as a community, we need to think about the different times that we can meet together, also about sharing maybe some of the opportunities, so we can grow more opportunity. And when some of the early careers who are here today or who have contributed to this special issue, as you become, let's say, mid to, let's say, senior level academics, like some of us in the room, that you can, you evolve and you continue to promote opportunities for early career. And I think, given the challenge, let's say, this is a challenge that is not going to go away. The whole energy, climate, just transition challenge. We need more and more work on this, and we need to be able to communicate our research with more voices representing more countries from all over the world to policymakers, and to begin, to make that impact. And, not just policymakers. One of the exciting things about the Journal of Energy and Natural Resources Law is the engagement with energy law practitioners who also, engage and read the journal. So it's a great, let's say, opportunity, I think, for all those who've contributed. And I think, finally, I just want to say that I commend, Godswill again. I think, this for me is an example of showing some ambition when you finish your PhD. You need to be thinking of some ambitious, innovative projects that can basically bring people together and, make an impact. And, it should be the first step, let's say, on a journey. Think of these exciting, ambitious projects. And, I commend the journal again for supporting Godswill to, deliver on such a project. And it's very good to see, the end result. And for all those in the room today, I think, if we want to achieve an impact and, change, change how, let's say, justice is viewed in the energy and climate transition challenges that we face today, I think, it will be very good to follow God's will, his lead, and, try and think, what is your own ambitious project where you can bring a collective group together and try and, further knowledge or achieve impact in a different way. And so on that note, I say thank you to everyone. I also say congratulations to everyone, and I also wish all those early careers a future congratulations on the exciting ideas. I think that you need to get going and use God's will as an inspiration to do that. So thank you very much.
Many thanks, Professor Heffron. So our next speaker is one of our co-editors. So it's been lovely to work with you. And we definitely didn't have enough time, in a longer period. I would have liked to have worked with you. But if I can ask Margarita to say a few words.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karen. And I share those sentiments. So perhaps we should use that as an inspiration to take on another collaborative project. Yeah, very many thanks indeed for all of you who have joined us today to celebrate the launch of this important special issue on energy justice discourse from Global South perspectives. I'm very honored to have been part of this initiative as one of the guest editors. And Karen, as you mentioned, the credit for initiating and leading this special issue really goes to God's will. And so I'm thrilled to celebrate his vision and leadership as part of this launch today. So let me say a few words now about the special issue itself. So in a nutshell, it represents a comprehensive exploration of energy justice from the viewpoint of the Global South, which, due to the previous lack of anything like it in a discourse dominated by Global North voices and concerns, deserves the qualification of pioneering. In terms of our approach, informed by God's will's vision, we really aim to bridge the gap between theory and practice. And that's also reflected in the selection of the articles. So empirically, the focus is on the unique contexts and challenges faced by countries in the Global South and communities when it comes to energy justice. And then the articles help unpack what that means then for theory as well as for legal norms and systems. And so the 9 articles in this issue cover really a rich tapestry of topics related to energy justice, examining the connections between energy justice and other key concepts like climate change mitigation, adaptation, and just transition, and various human rights. From West Africa to Chile, and there are proposals for implementation strategies to put energy justice principles into action. There's a whole range of themes that emerged across the articles, also themes in need of greater attention and further scholarship. And I'll highlight just 2. First, the clear and obvious need to consider the different socioeconomic challenges and energy access issues in the Global South compared to the Global North. It's very obvious, but unfortunately, it is necessary to flag that and also hopefully to highlight gaps that hopefully will inspire further scholarship to we may say decolonize the energy justice discourse. And then second, the special issue sheds light on the importance of integrating international law principles like common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities into energy transition policies. And as an international lawyer, I find it particularly important and also timely, given how exactly those principles are currently being brought to life in litigation around the world, before domestic courts, in cases such as Urgenda versus State of the Netherlands, where the Supreme Court of the Netherlands finds that the Netherlands' human rights obligations are informed by the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, and explains the principle as meaning partial fault means partial responsibility. And that is a very short statement, but potentially tremendous implications, of course, if you think it through in terms of the energy sectors and also its contributions to the climate crisis, including potentially also liability for losses and damages, which of course also are disproportionately felt in the global south, with of course also much smaller contributions to the problem, especially if we look from a historical perspective. And then at the same time, these principles are also being invoked in cases before regional and international courts. And so the Inter-American Court has also already confirmed that, for example, common differentiated responsibilities informs our understanding of human rights obligations, and means that states with greater historical responsibility also have a greater responsibility to mitigate, to reduce emissions, as well as providing financial assistance to essentially the global south in order to take more ambitious mitigation action, which then also has implications for the energy transition. And at the international level, we have just heard the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea confirm that common but differentiated responsibilities also affects the interpretation of the Convention on the Law of the Sea, and thus creates stronger or more far-reaching obligations on historical polluters, so to say. So it really emerges as if it really appears as if this principle is potentially really more far-reaching than some, especially than historical polluters, so to say, would have liked it to be, where the argument has been invoked often that this principle is just confined to the climate change regime. It's sitting in that treaty, that's where it belongs, and it doesn't have any application outside of that treaty. But that we're seeing that argument actually not flying in international litigation. And so the advisory proceedings on climate change before the Inter-American Court of Human Rights are still pending. And that is also true for those pending before the International Court of Justice. And those are perhaps the most relevant because they will, the scope there of application will of course be global. So what the International Court of Justice will say about states' obligations relating to climate change and also differentiation there is really going to potentially shape the international climate negotiations, but also regional and domestic policies around the globe. So all of this to say that what this special issue has given us in terms of insights into the implications of these principles, what it really means, why it's relevant, is very, very timely and very relevant. And so we hope that the special issue will not only stimulate further dialogue and research and debates about what the energy justice means as a concept, etc., but that it also really helps to shape these legal developments towards more equitable, just and sustainable energy systems globally. So to wrap up, I really want to express my heartfelt gratitude to all of the authors for their excellent contributions, to the peer reviewers, for the valuable feedback, sometimes repeatedly, and then of course for the journal's editorial team, Don, you in particular, for your unwavering support throughout this process. And we look forward to continuing this conversation and moving energy justice from an academic concept to a practical reality. Thank you.
Many thanks, Margarita. That was some really wonderful, I think, exploration of some of the latest cases. And as you say, the potential that the next two big cases have to sort of really blow open this field, I think. So if I can ask my colleague, Dr. Godswill Aguatoro, to take the floor. He's in the room, so we won't be able to zoom in on you, Godswill, because we're seeing the expanse of the room. But if I can ask you to take the floor.
Okay, you can't see me from where I'm standing, or you're just seeing the room.
We're seeing the room, but we're seeing the speaker in the corner, but we can't really see you, I'm afraid, but we can hear you.
Okay, okay. What if I stand here? Is this okay? Is this better?
Well, we can now see the back of you, but yes. But I think you're showing some slides in a few minutes. So.
All right. I think this is better.
Yeah, that's it. Well, we can see you. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Karen, and thank you, Professor Smith, and also Professor Heffron, and Professor Wawrinka, particularly for the support that I got from Professor Smith when we started this project. I'm just going to give a run through as to when we started the project and how we got to this particular point. Karen, if you could help me with the slide. Okay. All right. So that's just the title page. And if you go to the next slide, just to give you a bit of background, some of them you already know them that worked on the project. The three special issue guest editors, myself, Professor Karen, and Professor Wawrinka Sid. Okay, so this the next slide is about the steps that we actually took in terms of developing the special issue. So the idea started in December 2022 up until January 2023. I think that's about the period when I was thinking about my Viva. And when I finished the Viva, actually before finishing the Viva, that's when I approached Professor Karen and also Professor Margarita about this concept, to look at energy justice and also to try to do a special issue on the concept and looking at it from the view of Global South country. And so we worked on the concept note in January 2023. And the next point was to start thinking about journals that we could consider to host the special issue. And one of the things that I remember Margarita said to me was that it would be nice for us to have a journal that's an open access and also a leading journal in energy law. And that's how we came up with these three journals: the Global Energy Law and Sustainability Journal that is hosted at the University of Dundee, the Journal of Energy and Natural Resources Law, which is the one that finally came on board for this special issue, and of course the Journal of World Energy Law and Business. So by the time we approached the first journal, which is the Global Energy Law and Sustainability, they liked the idea, but the response from them was that they weren't ready at the moment to consider a special issue and that we could wait until 2025. And I told them that, that's way too long. I will probably move to the next. And then we sent the concept note to Professor Don Smith, and he welcomed the idea and asked me to give him a couple of months to get back to that he would get back to me. And in about a month time, he reached out to me and told me that the board has accepted the special issue, the concept note. And that's how we decided to put out the call for paper, which was in between March and May 2023. And that saw us through the project up until July 2024. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the structure of the special issue. So what we have done with the special issue is that we have divided the issue into 5 different parts. And what you're seeing on the screen now has to do with the different parts of the special issue. The first part, if you go to the next slide, please, really focuses on intersections between the concept of energy justice and other energy-related concepts, such as climate change, energy transition, just transition, and all of that. And in that part, we had 3 different articles that looked at intersections mainly between energy justice and other energy-related concepts. And the second part has to do with the dimensions of energy justice. Of course, when you talk about energy justice, from all of the literature that you would find out there, it's important for you to also, at some point, narrow down on the dimensions of energy justice. At the moment, there are 5 dimensions of energy justice. But in this part of the issue, 2 of the dimensions were focused in 2 articles. One on India and the second one that looked at different countries from Asia Pacific, South American, and of course, African countries. And the third part has to do with remedies for energy injustice. Of course, you're talking about energy justice. It also makes sense. It is imperative for you to start talking about the sort of remedies that will be used to sort of compensate injustices that exist in energy system, particularly as it relates to countries in the global south. And for that part 3 of the issue, we have 2 articles. One that focuses on African countries, the ECOWAS sub-region, and we have another paper that focuses on Chile. And the fourth part has to do with implementation. And one of the reasons why we had to include this particular part in the issue, because oftentimes when you look at the scholarship, you look at different literatures on energy justice, it has been about the concept, it has been about theorization. There's not so much articles on implementing the concept, like we see when you're talking about environmental justice. And we thought it was important to have a section or some of the articles that would deal decisively with implementation of the concept. And in that part, we have 2 articles. And the last part, if you go to the previous slide just before this one, just back, has to do with the book review. I think the book review came up at the tail end when we were concluding the project. And that's when Professor Smith, raised the idea of, whether we would want to include a book review in the special issue. And at that time, a book was just published, which you would see has been discussed by Chizzy in the course of this event. So we thought it was nice to throw that into the special issue because it's also important, based because of the concept on how popular the concept has been and the literature that are coming out on the concept. And this is the different parts, the 5 parts of the special issue on intersections, dimensions of energy justice, remedies for energy justice, and implementation, and of course, the book review. So what we're going to do next is to sort of give opportunity to the contributors to say a little bit about the different articles, the papers, the articles that are contained in the special issue. Unfortunately, we have very limited time to do this, so we're going to restrict the time to about 3 to 5 minutes, just for you to highlight the key points of the paper and also the argument that you've made, and if there are opportunities to move the discussions forward, as Professor Heffron mentioned, that this is an opportunity to sort of focus more, have more discussions on the concept of energy justice. For me, I like to think about implementation of the concept, going beyond the theorization, going beyond just talking about the concept to a point where we start narrowing down on implementation. I'm hoping that we have the contributors all online, and I'd like to start with the first article. So I'm going to call them out in the running order in the way they are being published in the editorial. So the first one is from Dr. Smith Azubike, Professor Ngobo Emese, and David Amakri. So if we could give the floor to Dr. Smith Azubike, I believe he would be the one that would talk about this particular paper in the issue.
Okay, thank you very much, Gospel, and also thank you to everyone attending this event today. I also want to say it's a good one seeing Professor Don Smith. The last time we saw was that last year at Durham Law School. Thank you very much, everyone. So very briefly, I understand my time is just 3 to 5 minutes. So we looked at climate change, energy transition, and the global south. So the core question we try to look at there is what can we actually learn when it comes to, what can we learn from the International Framework on the Ozone Depleting Substances, otherwise called the Montreal Protocol, and which was later amended by the Kigali Amendment. So the gravamen of our argument, the main thrust was that we can actually take away things from the way the Montreal Protocol, as amended by the Kigali Amendment, presented discussions there. Particularly if you look at Article 5 of the protocol, it talks about the idea of delayed transition. And I don't want to go into all the discussions about historic emissions. And so we try to look at what then should we consider to be just to the global south, particularly the fact that the emission is very low. And first, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has made the point clear that the globe is warming. And if that science is correct, what it means is that all hands must be on deck. But in also considering that transition, there's also the conception about justice. That is why we talk about the entire issue of a just transition, not just for workers, but also for countries, their economies, and all that. The problem with the global south is how do we transit to a decarbonized economy without impacting the economy itself. And we try to say, of course, the Montreal Protocol presents something we can actually learn from, and which is the whole discussion around a delayed transition. Decarbonization should be implemented. And our argument is that why the global north must put a stop to CO2 emission. The global south can actually be given a little more time to do that. And then, of course, some scholars would argue that, but the Paris Agreement actually takes into account the common but differentiated responsibilities of these countries. Yes, but if you look at it, one of the things we also discovered is that why that Paris Agreement is there, and the argument is plain in the Paris Agreement, you would agree with me that it is not so in reality. How do I mean? If one of the things that the global south have today is the development of their petroleum, and they do not have the economic means to develop this, so they'll also always go a borrowing. And in the process of going a borrowing, there have been roadblocks or barriers that saying you cannot borrow money to develop oil and gas facilities. That's fine because of the impact of climate change. And then we asked to say, what actually can the Montreal Protocol help us to do? Of course, if you look at the Montreal Protocol, it gave developing countries a space of time within which they will put an end to ozone depleting substances as contained. And the same argument is what we embedded or we mainstreamed in our paper to say, these roadblocks should be taken away. Why we put an end to fossil fuel activities in the global north, be it in the US, in the UK, be it in Norway, where we still have all these activities going on. Those activities must stop, particularly because of historic emission. And then if we also look at the global south, we can then plan to say the global south, this is the time within which you must transit. and taking into account their peculiarities, the whole issue around common but differentiated responsibilities and all that. So for us, it is more like looking at how best we can implement a just transition. And recently, I posted something on LinkedIn, and it's from the Business and Human Rights Resource Center, which actually the main argument is that if we must transit, then that transition must actually be just. And in that whole conception of just transition is very, very broad. So we argued that a delayed transition will be a form of justice for the Global South, particularly the fact that their emission rate is very low, less than 4%. And again, if we look at the seminal works of John Rawls, whom I respect so much, is the fact that he says that social and economic inequalities should be arranged in a way that everyone benefits from it. Then the question now arises: how then do we manage the transition from fossil fuel economy to a renewable or a decarbonized economy? So the point or the argument then, which was presented, lies in what we talk about, what I've talked about, a delayed transition. And those were the main thrust of our argument. I wouldn't want to take much of our time. Thank you very much for listening.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Azubike. The next article in that same part, which is on intersections, it's from Dr. Yeni Yabe and Dr. Vito Azubike. I believe Dr. Abe would be speaking to that paper.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so thank you very much, God's will. And first of all, I want to thank all the editors and anonymous reviewers as well for carrying effort in ensuring that our paper is published. So just very briefly, very briefly, we re-examined the idea or the notion between energy justice and just transition. And I think as Professor Efron mentioned, there's been a lot of research in this area. But what we looked at is how we can actually accentuate this dichotomy or dilemma, not just about, moving from one economy to another, but how do you ensure that vulnerable communities and understaffed communities are actually given consideration in this transition. So one of the things, and again, because we focused on Africa, we kind of looked at, the scholars and the jurisprudence of third world scholars, more like third world approach to international laws, and we therefore unpacked and addressed the underlying causes of energy injustice. And then we consider the political economy and the power dynamics surrounding socio-technical energy transitions in Africa, looking at examples in Namibia, South Africa, Nigeria. We looked at the laws as well, climate change laws, and how they are positioned to ensure that we have just transition. We also investigated the social, economic, and environmental dimensions of just transition in Africa. And we assessed where the injustices occur. We identified who bears the burden of these injustices, and then we determined potential remedies on how energy justice can be incorporated into energy systems to advance fairness. Like I said, we looked at the convergence of energy justice and energy transition, looking at the theories of energy justice and just transition regarding how African countries can meet their energy transition goals. Just, I think yesterday, I think the South African Parliament actually signed the climate change law, which incorporated, in fact, which on my first quick look at, incorporated some of the arguments which we made in the paper. So realistically, we thought that mainstreaming justice dimension, and then we kind of came up with an inexhaustive building blocks for safeguarding just transition in Africa, and we highlighted the need for comprehensive policy frameworks that balance development concerns and market creation. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Abe. The next is from Sakshan Misra and Shaya Badwad. I think Shaya would be speaking to this paper.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, please.
All right. So first of all, I would like to thank the editors of this special issue who actually supported the publication, and also my co-author who's present here. It was a very exciting experience to write about this particular perspective that we have brought out from the Global South countries. And in our paper, we have tried to discuss the 3D triology framework. The 3D triology framework means decarbonization, decentralization, and democratization. And we have discussed the relevance of this 3D triology in the implementation of just energy transition agendas in the rural communities of Global South countries.
Okay.
We chose three
Hello,
Global South.
Joyce.
Hello?
Okay, that's from Smith.
All right.
Yes.
And
Yep.
we chose three Global South countries, Nepal, Bhutan, and India. While looking at the projects that were developed in these Global South countries, we argued that the just transitions should be implemented via developing nationally independent but locally driven renewable energy projects in the Global South countries. And we've taken and we've discussed various local community projects that were led in these three countries. We tried to understand how the projects were in a couple of countries funded by the local community. So they contributed small money, whatever they could. They also contributed sometimes labor and participated in the development of the just transition projects at the local level. And that sort of allowed the local communities to connect with the renewable energy projects, and also to integrate with them at a level where they found co-benefits of having a renewable energy development in the rural areas of these Global South communities. But also at the same time taking responsibility and ownership and feeling invested in the development of it, and continued maintenance of it. Of course, we were also able to find some challenges in having the community ownership, which revolves around various factors, including financial, technical capability, scientific capability to maintain and continue with renewable energy projects, and also some political factors amongst others. Our conclusion in the paper is that we are arguing that Global South communities can move forward with a decarbonization, decentralization, and democratization of their energy transitions by becoming energy prosumer communities. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Shaya, for that. And so we move on to the second part, which, as I earlier mentioned, has two articles that looked at specifically the dimensions and some of the dimensions of energy justice. And I'd like to give the floor to Shasi Kant Yadav, if you're with us, to speak on this paper.
Thank you, Godwill. Am I audible?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Godwill, Carrie, and Margareta for your editorial support. And thank you, Professor Heffron and Professor Smith. I've had pleasure working with them before. They provided editorial support for my previous articles, and their work has been influential for this article as well. So thank you very much for that as well. So in this article, the conceptualization of this article started by dividing energy justice into three different phases. I understand energy justice became a conceptual framework. And after becoming a conceptual framework, the application of this conceptual framework was more and more analyzed from a global north perspective. There were a lot of articles which saw energy justice dimensions in windmills and solar panels projects, and most of them were from global north perspective. And I was looking at the opportunity of contextualizing the concept of energy justice from Global South perspective, and that is how this call for paper fits in perfectly. My more pointed research is on shale gas fracking in India, and there is a focus on coal to natural gas transition in India. And I wanted to highlight how the procedure of moving from coal to natural gas in India could lead to planning issues and procedural issues. And with that in mind, I started this paper. One of the major arguments of this paper is that the current fracking-led coal to natural gas transition in India could lead to violation of fundamental rights of citizens in India. And I do so by linking the procedural energy justice as a concept with the constitutionally granted fundamental right in India, which is Article 21, right to life, as well as Article 19. We have a rich literature in India which cements energy justice within the fundamental rights or human rights framework. And I explored that through three key tenets of procedural justice, which is information, inclusion, and influence. I look into the environmental impact assessment reports and public hearings, which have been conducted to do these fracking projects. And I argue that the contextualization of these fracking projects as transitional projects would lead to violation of fundamental rights of people. And that is why we need to see that contextualization and reassess it very carefully. Yeah, in the conclusion, I gave some key recommendations that how to make this public participation and how to make procedures more robust. And I invite you all to go through the paper, and I look forward to hearing your comments on that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Asi. And next we have Halima for I believe you will be the one speaking on this paper.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, my name is Halima Ibrahim. I'm a PhD researcher at the Energy Justice and Social Contract Chair, based at the University of Pau in France, with my colleagues, Professor Raphael Heffron, who is my supervisor, as well as my co-PhD researchers, Chioma Basil, Alicia Phillips, as well as Jean-Baptiste Jarrat. We analyzed how to future-proof green hydrogen development in the global south. We use the procedural justice perspective to analyze this. And the main goal of this paper is to avoid further injustices in the global south as we implement the commitments that countries have made to transition away from fossil fuels. So we looked at 9 countries in the global south. We looked at 3 in the Asia Pacific, Thailand, Vietnam, and China. We looked at 3 in South America, Brazil, Chile, and Colombia. And we looked at 3 in Africa, South Africa, Namibia, and Kenya. So we analyzed the case for green hydrogen. Do we actually have a case for green hydrogen in the global south? We assessed existing renewable energy resources, as well as climate targets. You know very well that, to produce 1 kilogram of green hydrogen, we need 50 to 60 kilowatt hours of renewable electricity. So green hydrogen is not the next step. We have another step. We need to deploy more renewable electricity to get to green hydrogen. So we then looked at current energy, renewable energy resources in these countries. We then looked at the potential for scale up of these renewable energy resources through, of course, the published climate targets of each country. We then looked at the socioeconomic makeup of these countries and whether current policy and legislation actually supports a green hydrogen economy. So we utilized a framework that was advanced by Professor Heffron and Professor De Fanel, both of them my supervisors, in their 2023 article on how energy justice can be implemented through a new social contract. And we proposed 3 recommendations in our analysis. We recommended that 1, the energy system should be viewed as one system, encompassing the entire energy life cycle. We also recommended that due process needs to be followed in the design of this system. And thirdly, that there has to be disclosure of information across all energy activities, and we should not have information asymmetry to enable citizens make informed decisions about green hydrogen. So our analysis identified similarities in the green hydrogen pathways of some of these countries. For example, we found Kenya, Namibia, South Africa, Brazil, Chile, Vietnam, and Thailand have Germany as a key partner and investor in the field. We argue that these countries need to take a holistic view of their energy system, and they should align their energy policies with respect to their national needs, as opposed to the availability of investment funds, because this will lead to more injustices occurring. We also found whether there exists immediate needs to transition. So we found that whether we have current enough renewable energy resources in these countries to be able to transition, and it found a positive answer for Kenya, Colombia, Namibia, China, Brazil, and Chile, and a negative answer for Thailand, South Africa, and Vietnam. And it looked at whether there's a potential for scale up of these renewable energies. It found yes, through the climate targets of these countries, there is potential for scale up of these renewable energy resources that would then be the sources of green hydrogen. We found that none of these countries actually had legislation with respect to green hydrogen. They had at least a policy or a strategy in place. We found Chile to have had the most comprehensive policy of the 9 countries to address green hydrogen. They focused on taxation and innovation. We found, however, that all of the 9 countries had either operational green hydrogen projects or they were in a planning phase. And therefore, we argued that if we had a legal framework through procedural justice, it would boost the scale up and development of green hydrogen in the sector. So, the key contribution of our article is that we were able to identify, procedural injustices in the development of, green hydrogen policy and projects in the 9 countries. And, we argue that these countries need to prioritize their internal needs. And some of these needs are, energy access and decarbonizing their energy systems before actually talking about development of green hydrogen with respect to hard-to-abate sectors and transportation in the global north. They had to focus on national needs. We also recommended that, another highlight of our article is that, it is the first comprehensive examination of green hydrogen in the global south. And we proposed and recommended in terms of future areas of research, you can actually expand that application to other countries. You could include the 4 other justice frameworks: distributive, restorative, cosmopolitan, and recognition justice, to analyze the development of green hydrogen. And we also recommended that beyond green hydrogen, you could also analyze the status of blue and gray hydrogen, which is actually, it constitutes the majority of hydrogen, of current hydrogen in the global framework. I'll stop there. Thank you so much, Dr. Agbaitoro, as well as my co-authors.
Thank you so much, Halima. I mean, I particularly like this paper because it does speak to, how broad the issue is in terms of covering different countries within the global south. So thank you very much, Halima, for that. So next we move to the remedies, the part on remedies for energy injustice. As I've mentioned, for there to be energy justice, there must have been some injustices that exist within energy systems and how they operate. And please permit me to give the floor to Dr. Muyiwa Adigun to speak on his paper.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, please.
Oh, great, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gospel Agbaitoro, and thank you, everyone here. The title of my article is Legal Remedies for Energy Injustice in the ECOWAS sub-region, the role of the ECOWAS Court. what I examined in the article is legal remedies that are available for energy injustice, and specifically before the ECOWAS court. But before you can talk about legal remedies, certainly there must be legal right. So if there is no legal right, certainly you cannot start talking about legal remedies. So when I look at energy concepts, energy justice concepts, and I tried as much as possible to place them within legal rights, within the context of human rights law. So what I did was to look at African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and then to see the extent to which I can create rights out of energy justice. For example, distributional justice, which is an aspect of energy justice. So if you want to couch it in human rights terms, how are you going to do it? And then under what provisions of the African Charter? Distributional justice really is not, strictly speaking, is difficult to be subsumed because it may dovetail into economic system, whether you are a capitalist, whether the system is a capitalist one or a socialist one. But there are provisions that protect children, provisions that protect women. And I think that it could be subsumed under that. With respect to recognition-based justice, there are provisions in the African Charter, specifically the right to existence. Yes, there is a provision on the right to existence within the African Charter. And I think recognition-based justice can be subsumed within that. And of course, procedural justice, which of course emphasizes informed consent. I think the right to information under the African Charter can be subsumed under that. So having settled the idea that at least, of course, energy justice concept is broader than just distributional recognition-based and procedural, but at least these three can find a reflection within the African Charter on Human People's Rights. So having now couched or carved out the possibility of a legal right, then the next one I examined was, okay, fine, what is the remedy that is available? The treaty establishing the ECOWAS court tends to suggest that the only remedy the ECOWAS court can grant is in terms of damages that can be awarded. And then this obviously may be limiting when we are talking about the concept of energy justice. So I now relied on the state responsibility that any wrong committed by states within international law is to be remedied by the state. And since it is customary international law, then the ECOWAS courts can indeed apply it, and it is not limited by the treaty creating it. That tends to suggest the only remedy it can give is that of award of damages. And so in conclusion, my contention is that energy justice can be couched in human rights terms, and of course, wide arrays of remedies can be granted by the ECOWAS court. So, thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Adigun. And the last article for this particular part is from Lizzie, who's here in person. She's traveled all the way from London for this event. And thank you very much for coming. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'll just time myself so that I don't talk too long. My name is Lizzie Stefani. I co-authored a piece with Emiliano, who is joining us on Zoom. Wanted to also just thank God's Will and the whole editorial team for including this piece. We focused on renewable development in Chile and conflicts amongst indigenous groups, energy producers, companies and the Chilean government. So this paper looks specifically at hydropower development, and it proposes new energy justice laws to encourage just cooperation between these conflicting groups. Also wanted to thank the Energy Justice and Social Contract Chair, Rafael Heffron, if he's still logged on. I was a research fellow with them while I was working on this paper, so it's great to see everything come together. So a little bit more on the energy conflicts going on in Chile. For the last couple of decades, there have been protests, mostly by Mapuche indigenous groups against energy developers and production in the Bio region. And so therefore, we believe solutions are needed in Chile to create better cooperation between these groups. And it's especially important in light of Chile's attempts to pivot from fossil fuels. So Halima mentioned some of the procedures already in place in Chile. They have been really focused on trying to develop more hydropower, having ambitious targets, 45 to 48% of their electricity generation being from hydropower. Chile also plans to shut down all of their coal power plants by 2040. And so it's safe to say Chile's committed to meeting its climate goals and is looking to hydropower as a way to help fill in some of the gaps. On the outset, in our paper, we also observe some of the power relations underpinning the energy transition in Chile, emphasizing a need for just approaches to clean energy development. So we acknowledge that there are power imbalances between the Chilean government, indigenous groups, and also power imbalances between energy companies and indigenous groups, specifically around access to and use of land and water resources. In order to better understand some of these conflicts, we looked at court cases that were brought by various groups, most of whom were indigenous communities that were affected by large and small scale hydropower projects. And so we looked through Chile's judicial powers databases, searched for a few keywords, and ended up narrowing down our cases to 6 cases, and then specifically taking an in-depth look at 2 of the cases. So just very quickly, one of them was about indigenous groups, involved an indigenous group bringing a claim to challenge inadequate, opaque, and unfair consultation processes for a hydropower project. And then the second case, by contrast, was actually brought by a Chilean company after indigenous groups had set up a blockade of a road leading to a hydropower plant. So 2 sides of the coin. There are ongoing conflicts, and some of the key takeaways we have is that there's a lack of consistency in the case outcomes and the primary law applied. There's also administrative burdens that indigenous groups have to overcome in order to hear their claims in court, produce enough evidence so that their claims make it through. And finally, the important point is that throughout the court cases, we found that there was a lack of recognition of indigenous values, worldviews, and knowledges, which leads me to some of the solutions that we proposed. We came up with 2 energy justice laws for Chile to potentially adopt. One, to compensate the Mapuche for ancestral land losses for hydropower projects that have already been operating for decades. And then the second, recognition justice law focused on establishing a new relationship between the Mapuche and the Chilean government, and encouraging more of a platform for indigenous knowledge. So that would be, maybe the takeaway from our research is that there's an opportunity in Chile to break ground and try out new ways of integrating indigenous perspectives into the clean energy movement. So thank you so much, and very happy to talk to you all further about that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lizzie. Thank you. All right, and I would move to the last part, or not the last, but the fourth part of the special issue, which these are with implementation of the energy justice concept. And I want to particularly thank Yu Cheng and Weimin Yang. I don't know what time it is right now in China, but I understand that it's getting late. And I mean, for staying up this time to speak to the paper. So I'll give the floor to Weimin Yang, who I believe will be taking us through this particular paper.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Goswell. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Yes, thank you, everyone. My name is Weimin Yang. Associate Professor Yu Chen and I have conducted a reflective analysis on China's energy policies. The reason why we want to do this study is that we discover energy injustices in daily life. For example, to prevent and control air pollution, Tianjin, Hebei, and several China's northern provinces started the plan named Clean Winter Heating in 2017, promoting the use of gas instead of coal. However, due to the unreasonable setting of energy rates and higher price of gas heating rather than burning coal, some rural families in North China can't afford gas heating, thus unable to live or do business normally and even face the administrative penalties because of burning coal for heating. Faced with the above-mentioned injustices, the first part of the article first reviews China's energy policies, examining how energy justice is reflected. We find that energy justice is manifested indirectly in China's policies. Policymakers use indirect terms such as universal energy services, prioritizing people's livelihoods, shared development, people-oriented. We concluded that although China has not exactly used the specific expression of energy justice in its policies, energy justice as a value concept is embedded and reflected in China's energy policies. After this review, we then apply systematic energy justice as a framework to evaluate China's energy policies regarding energy production, supply, consumption, and waste disposal in the second part. Overall, although there are distribution and procedural injustices in policies, checking it over a long period of time, China had taken an adaptive path to achieve energy justice by continuously adjusting its policies. The reason why systematic energy justice is applied here is to avoid simple copy of energy justice theory derived from Western countries. Systematic energy justice advocated here emphasizes the integrated understanding and application of energy justice by considering national context, spatial dimensions, and temporal dimensions. In this regard, China has its unique cultural, social, and political system. For example, the Confucian concept of justice in China places more emphasis on individual obligations and highlights collective interests. Also, China always gives priority to the goal of energy security. Finally, the third part of the article explores how to incorporate recognition, distribution, and procedural justice into the entire process of China's energy governance. For more detailed contents, please refer to the full text. Thank you for your listening. Last but not the least, I would like to thank the Journal of Energy and Natural Resources Law for your support and assistance. Both editors and reviewers gave us professional suggestions and valuable publishing opportunities, as well as today's seminars for discussing and sharing. That's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Weimin Yang, for that. And the last paper in this particular part was authored by myself, and it's titled Implementing Energy Justice Through Corporate Social Responsibility of Multinational Corporations in Energy and Extractive Industries. old body in new robes. I want to start off by saying that something I already said earlier on in the course of this event, that for my own part, in terms of what I'm looking at in the future when it comes to energy justice, is about more on implementation of the concept. As I've highlighted, there has been a body of work, lots of work on the concept itself, but not so much on implementation. And I drew inspiration for this particular paper from the paper that was written and published by Professor Heffron and Professor Luis de Fontenelle on implementing energy justice through a new social contract. I thought about, this is the time to start talking about implementing the concept. And I looked at, the role that stakeholders such as multinational corporations that are always involved in terms of energy injustices alongside governments, departments, what role could they play in terms of implementing the concept? And I looked at this, implementation as a tool through 4 dimensions of energy justice: the distributive, procedural, recognition, and restorative justice. So what I argued in the paper, just to summarize, is that corporate social responsibility remains, a viable tool, an interpretative tool that multinational corporations can leverage on to implement energy justice, particularly in areas where they carry out their operation. For example, they could think about, trying to address issues that has to do with distributive energy injustice, trying to focus more on other energy sources, by divesting resources to build renewables, to build cleaner energies, in order to address the injustice of lack of access. I also talked about procedural, that they could also, use their corporate social responsibility initiatives to drive procedural justice. The same thing for recognition justice and restorative justice. Restorative justice being, trying to use corporate social responsibility to address issues that has to do with decommissioning, that not just focusing on the traditional idea or traditional concept of corporate social responsibility that we see in many countries in the global south, such as building schools, building community centers. They could actually go beyond that field and try to do more tailored corporate social responsibility that is linked to addressing energy justice issues within countries in the global south. So that concludes the substantive articles that are, contained in the special issue. At this time, I'd like to call my friend, Dr. Chizio Ogungbada, who I had to plead with in the dying minutes to please come to my rescue in terms of, adding the book review, and he was able to deliver on this project. So Chizi, I'll give the floor to you now to speak on the book review.
Many thanks, Dr. Godswill, for the opportunity. Before I start, I just want to commend everyone involved in this special issue. And just to re-echo some of the words of the earlier speakers, the special issue, makes a significant contribution to the field of energy justice. And, trying to carry on or advance the conversation, which has already begun on the subject. So it's absolutely a great thing to have at this point in time. Then thank you again to the editorial team, at least, for giving me the opportunity to review this book. I will just make my presentation really, really brief, given the constraints of time that we've got just now. Now, the first thing to say is that I thoroughly enjoyed reading the handbook on energy justice, and that's one of the reasons is simply that it contributes to the scholarship. So, I mean, as we all have come to understand, energy justice has been expanding and increasing since the last couple of years, say 10 years and all of that. So it's really, really a good thing to see this book coming out at this point in time. I just want to highlight some key characteristics of the book. There are 2 main characteristics which I want to touch upon, which I feel sets the book apart from other textbooks on the same subject, or monographs, if you will, on the same subject. The first is that the handbook tries to liberalize the field of energy justice. And this is the sentiment that we've heard over the course of this afternoon. And what that simply means is that it tries to give perspectives from the global south regarding energy justice. And this is a significant undertaking because for a very long time, energy justice research and scholarship has been dominated by views from the Western Hemisphere, or what is usually known as or referred to as the global north. This is not bad per se. This is not a wrong turn per se, because those views from the global north are still, they still merit consideration, in their own rights. Nevertheless, in order for us to, de-emphasize the whole concept of the order, in order for us to have an inclusive field, there is a need to hear perspectives from the other side of the spectrum, which is the global south. And the Handbook on Energy Justice does that in several book chapters in it. The other point, again, I wanted to highlight, which struck me, was that the book treated certain themes, which I tend to call non-traditional themes in energy justice scholarship and research. Now, what that simply means is that if you look at many of energy justice treaties or articles, such as we've got in this special issue, the recurring, the recurring decimal is, things like the energy transition, climate change, and so on. Now, certain themes like housing were treated in this book, which I thought was really, really original. And again, to energy justice from gender-based perspective. And that's an area too that has been touched in scholarship, but it's something that requires much or more research on. So the book really did well with respect to that. Now, in terms of implementation, and I'll try to draw the curtain on this point. In terms of implementation, the book did very well in trying to show us how policy or political tools could be used or leveraged upon to operationalize energy justice, or to use the phrase of my former supervisor, move energy justice from theory to practice. It does very well in doing that. Nevertheless, I was going to think that perhaps we could have more material on how law could be used in trying to operationalize energy justice. For example, many of the articles in the special issue try to show the interaction between law and energy justice. And I think that's something that is really, really missing out in the literature, okay? So perhaps, the editors for in the book might consider for future editions, to include chapters on how energy justice interact with law. In any case, this book was it's a great book, thoroughly adds to the literature, and it's been my pleasure reading it and also writing a review on it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Chizzy, for that. And I think that brings us to sort of the run through of all of the papers that are contained in the special issue. Just a couple of things that I needed to say. First, I'd like to thank Professor Don Smith for the opportunity. I understand he has left because he had other meetings and also quite early right now in Colorado. Thank him for the opportunity that he gave to us, all the guest editors, to be able to put through this particular project. And I also want to thank my co-guest editors, particularly my supervisor, Professor Karen Hum. She doesn't like me addressing her that way anymore, but she's still my supervisor, who supervised my PhD. And also to thank Margarita, who I understand has also left because she had other commitment as well, for the support and also the collaboration for the project. Also, I'd like to thank all of the contributors, very fine papers. I enjoyed reading the papers, and it was really difficult. I mean, Karen can attest to this, selecting the papers, because we had a total of 51 submissions for the entire issue. and it was really difficult to narrow it down to 9 papers. But we tried our best to ensure that we accommodate wide spectrum of papers that go across board. And I'd like to thank some of the reviewers who are, unfortunately I cannot disclose them today, but some of them are with us in this particular event for the dedication and their excellent work in supporting us to bring this project to fruition. And also thanks to everyone who has made that time to attend this event today. Thanks to the audience here, not so much, but I really appreciate them for coming. Lizzie, who came all the way from London, and my friend as well, Kristen Ezigo, who also came all the way from London just to support and this particular event. Karen, I'll leave you to say the last words if you want to.
Sure, I haven't prepared anything, but no, I just wanted to, I think we've said it so many times, but thank you to God's will. I mean, I do really appreciate what Professor Heffron said about making sure that early career researchers have, such opportunities. But absolutely, honestly, in my mind, this was never about affording God's will and opportunity as an early career researcher. He took this on. He was the driving force. He brought us on, me and Margarita. So, it's his inspiration. It's his work. So absolutely all credit to him, whether he's early career researcher or not, whether he was, a more established researcher. God's will did this. So, and brought us on board. Definitely not the other way around. We did not give him this opportunity. He took this opportunity. So I would absolutely say to everybody else to take that as inspiration. But no, absolutely. Well done, God's will, and well done everybody else who's involved. As I think Professor Heffron said, we said this will be there. This will be read by many people, and finally, Global South voices will start to really have an impact, I think, in this area, not just because of this special issue, but because of all the work of the colleagues here, I think, in the room. So thank you, God's will. Thank you, everybody. And I think, do you want the last word, God's will? Or
yeah, that's fine. Thank you, everyone. We were planning to see how we can get hard copies, because this had to be published because of the event today. It had to go out on the latest articles. If you go on the website of the journal, you find that they are all on the latest articles. So the moment it is put into the issue, it's going to be volume 42, issue 3, the 3rd issue for the year. And the moment that is done, I'm being told that the hard copies will be out. It will be published next month in August, before the end of the month. And we're hoping that we could get some copies to all of the contributors. So I will be contacting the contributors to let them know, and also for them to share their postal address for us to get copies to them. And just say thank you again, and I hope to see some of you in person pretty much soon. All right. Okay. Thank you very much.